Views on this program are opinions of dental industry experts and not necessarily those of dentist advisors. Opinions shared in the following interview do not constitute personal financial advice. This program is furnished by Dentist Advisors, a registered investment advisor. You're tuned into Dentist Money Industry Expert Series. Now here's your host, Reese Harper.
Welcome to the Dentist Money Show. I'm your host, Reese Harper, here with a special guest who's flown into the studio in Salt Lake City from Denver, Dr. Doug Carlsen. Doug, how you doing today?
I am doing fine. The weather here is just fabulous today.
I was glad
breezy,
that it wasn't
cool. Man.
Yeah, it wasn't raining on you when you got in.
We had thunderstorms in Denver last night, so it was weird about midnight, back and forth and back and forth. So this is gorgeous.
We really appreciate you coming in, and I want to jump right into the interview because there's so much stuff to cover, and you've got such a wealth of knowledge. You've retired earlier than most dentists will ever retire. You've had a great practice, a great career. You've learned a lot of clinical skills, and you've got financial skills, and you've been a writer, a speaker. I mean, you've really impacted the dental community in a lot of different ways over your career, and I think you've got one of the most interesting stories of people in dentistry right now. And I think it's just it'll be really good for our listeners to get some insight into the things that you've learned along the way, and the questions that I've kind of thought through have kind of been targeting, getting the best of Doug Carlsen that we can in the short amount of time we've got. So I appreciate you being willing to pop in and take these questions. So let's jump into the first one, which I think shows kind of an interesting side, or gives us some perspective into how you've developed some of your financial philosophies, which is, tell me a little bit about your financial circumstances growing up and the experience that helped shape your financial philosophy and your views on money.
Growing up, a lot of dentists grow up in controlling families. This was brought to light many years ago. Bob Lavoie talked about it in particular 20 years ago. My family was controlling. We were strict about a lot of different things, and it wasn't just money. It was about activities in particular. So I talk about the man in my notes here, but my dad was the man, and my mom too, as far as what we could do. An example that I put down here is that in college, going into my sophomore year, I had enough money saved through working in the summers and some during the school year to buy a used car, and pay for insurance and basically everything. I could take care of it. And both my parents said, no, you're not going to do that. If you're going to come home and live here during vacation, I went away to school, then you're not going to have that home to come to anymore if you do that. So it's like, wait a minute.
Interesting.
Wait a minute, I'm being responsible, I've got everything taken care of, and you won't let me do it? No. So I think that sort of thing instilled an attitude in me that there were always strings attached to things in my family, or it seemed that way. Okay. And of course, my family and I got along fine over the years. But that was something where whenever there was debt to be paid or debt to be taken on, I didn't want to owe the man.
Okay.
The man being the big man, the corporation, the company.
How do you see that affecting dentists other dentists, how do you think their financial circumstances growing up play into how they behave?
A lot of dentists, come from dental families where their education is paid for, and it's easy for them financially. Others work like crazy and don't have anything. Worked a lot during dental school, which I did not. And had a tougher time of it. I would say the guys that had the tougher time in dental school, who had to work on the side during college a lot, or maybe even had to do, say, lab work in dental school, probably are doing better in their practices. Just because it was tougher for them and they knew how to work hard. Yeah.
Well, you write a lot in your Dental Town articles, your videos, your posts. I mean, you've retired early. You lived a pretty frugal, conservative lifestyle to make it all happen. And I think people who are, familiar with your work, they know that about you, and they appreciate it. They respect that. They like that candor, that perspective that you share about making some hard decisions, owning up to the fact that you can't have everything you want sometimes. And yet there's this element, probably a significant portion of dentists that say, you know what, I've worked hard for all this stuff. I've put a lot of energy and effort into this, and I deserve to have the things I want. And so how do you kind of balance the advice of like being really frugal and conservative with enjoying the money along the way. What would you say looking back, at this point?
That's a tough one. That's a really tough one. And by the way, I did buy the big house. I bought the McMansion in 1989 at age 39. Mm-hmm. It was a big house in Albuquerque. Did it work out financially? Yes. And the one thing that I really kept track of, both my wife and I did very well, was not buying a bunch of upgrades and watching our maintenance. And that's where people really get into trouble. So,
I mean, like remodels and improvements and furnishings?
It's all about remodels and improvements. Tom Stanley, I'm going to jump ahead here from where our notes were, but Tom Stanley and Danko, who wrote the Millionaire Next Door series, said that your choice of home and neighborhood has the most impact on your net worth more than anything else. And I really believe that. A lot of times with more expensive homes, actually, you can spend up to 3 to 4% per year just on maintenance and upgrades. And that's not including your mortgage and your insurance and taxes.
Yeah.
So it can get crazy. Anyway, so we kept that under control, and it did work out in the long term. But dentists who have more modest homes in particular seem to be able to save more easily. And you probably see that in your business.
Yeah,
also.
I mean, how do you, I think that's an important point to kind of talk on as it relates to this. Does, I want to enjoy my life. I mean, a lot of people, that's kind of their big moment, right? Is when they buy that house, they feel like they've arrived, but it seems like it's a moving target too sometimes, where, at least in my experience, if what was the dream home is no longer the dream home 7 or 8 years later, and sometimes people have to get to the point where they realize that a house is it's not what is providing them.
It's a money pit.
It's a money pit, right?
Actually, right now in Denver, my wife, in retirement, wanted to buy something in an older neighborhood in Denver. Bigger homes in older neighborhoods are money pits.
Yeah.
So what we have
historic.
right now,
they're classy.
It's historic. It's 3,000 square feet, and I have to watch it very, very carefully. Every time it hails like it did yesterday, it's like, oh no, is this going to be another roof? But back to the point about spending, and I deserve. I'm a doctor. I worked hard. I work hard at the office. My back is sore. I'm 50 years old. I need something. Cars, I don't think are a big issue. I've ranted for a long time about cars and buying something that's slightly used versus something new, different types of luxury cars. I don't even think that's as important as the home is.
It's just the home's a much bigger portion of the budget.
It becomes that, yes.
Yeah.
So to have some niceties around your home and around your life are certainly good. One thing I wanted to bring up is vacation for doctor and vacation time. I don't think doctors spend nearly enough time out of the office doing something pleasurable. So many doctors will take vacations which are coordinated with a CE course. I think that's cheating.
Yeah.
You need time away from dentistry.
To really disconnect.
Yeah. 6 weeks a year is probably ideal. How many guys do that? Hardly any.
Yeah.
I never did. But to take that time away and recharge your batteries, it's been proven over and over again by various consultants that you come out ahead financially, and your income is actually higher if you do take more time off.
What do you think is reasonable? Do you have any guesses on what you think reasonable time off would be?
I think at least three weeks a year.
Yeah.
Realistically, I took 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to point out is you lose so much money being away from the practice. You might as well take a luxury vacation.
Yeah.
You don't have to cheapskate that either.
The cost is leaving.
So here's Carlsen, who's frugal, saying, spend more time on vacation, spend more money. It still is going to have very little effect versus other things that you spend your money on.
Yeah, I think this is interesting because I'm getting a little bit of insight into your personality. I can see that there are some things you really do value, and you are willing to spend money on some stuff that really does result in a nice lifestyle balance. But in the same token, there's a lot of waste. And I think specifically as it relates to housing, let's talk about is it probably a lot of it boils down to the square footage. And it's the square footage that ends up kind of coming back to bite you long term. Maybe not the house itself, at least in my experience, that's been the challenge I've seen.
Yes.
So,
and you mentioned early, after 6 or 7 years, it's not new anymore.
Yeah.
What do? You do a new kitchen, or you extend out and back, or you build that infinity pool.
And they don't realize that the square footage isn't just the higher mortgage expense. It brings a lot of other things into your financial life that you wouldn't realize start coming up. If you buy a house in the nicer neighborhood, then everyone has pools. And then
you're taking away my thunder, but keep going. This is perfect. Yes,
everyone has pools, right?
The kids go to private schools.
Yeah, and then kids go to private schools.
Which private school is the best? They're the more expensive in town.
In my neighborhood right now, if I sent all my kids to private school, which I know is the best school, I'd be spending more money per year than what it costs me to live. Whatever. But anyway, pools, furnishings plays a big deal in this too. I don't think people realize that there's always little trinkets that you need within the house to furnish it, to keep it maintained, to have it looking nice. And that can add up to something that you've referred to often as like a percentage of the total cost of the house, right? Talk about that just a little bit.
Yeah, but don't touch my man cave.
Okay.
Don't touch my man cave.
Okay, so
I've got to have a good receiver. I've got to have really quality speakers. By the way, we're kind of down in a man cave here, and this is awesome down here where we're recording today. The main thing that I caution people about is the upgrades and staging them.
Okay.
And that's what we're doing exactly in our house right now. We're going to put in some cabinets this year. We've got a couple other little projects planned. But redoing the garage is probably 5 years off, 8 years off. Stage your upgrades. Budget them.
Yeah.
We've got $10,000 to spend this year, maybe $5,000 next year. What are we going to do? People tend to think, we really deserve the kitchen. It's going to cost $135,000. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And then a year later, well, now we need the pool. That's what really eats you up.
Yeah. Let's talk about this idea that financial health is relative, okay? Because, not a choice for a multi-location specialist is not the same choice as a single location GP that is struggling to get by.
Dentists compare production all the time. That seems to be the big number, and overhead. You go into much more important detail than they do on that. So that's one thing that we compare. Yeah.
We talk a lot about...
Lead on with this a little bit more here,
we
Reese.
we talk a lot about this in our practice where we say, if you make... the way we look at how healthy someone is financially is if their savings rate is high, meaning if the total amount of money that you don't use in a year, right, that you either save into your investments or that piles up in your practice checking, let's say we make $250,000 a year, and your savings rate is 25%. From my perspective, a 25% savings rate on $250,000 is a really healthy number.
That's darn good.
Really good for someone at that income level because, as everyone knows, out of that first $250,000, all of us have our living expenses that come out of that first $250,000, or a lot of it does. Someone who makes $500,000 a year, their savings rate can probably be a little bit higher. And
exactly.
In a lot of cases, it's not. And so, someone who's making $1 million or more a year, their savings rate can be a lot higher, but it's often not. And so, knowing your own savings rate to me tells me whether your lifestyle is in balance.
Yeah, you're talking savings versus spending in particular. Someone who is making $1 million a year and is only saving $25,000, there's a whole lot more spending going on there.
Yep.
And is that appropriate long term, especially in retirement when they may need to cut back quite a bit?
And I just tell people, don't beat yourself up over what you're spending if your savings rate is good.
That's a huge point. As long as you're saving at an appropriate level, it's your life. You decide what you want to do. If you want to buy a plane and everything is within limits that you can afford, that's fine.
I think one of the things that I think people would be interested in learning from you about are that you've given on people a lot of tools and a lot of education to self-direct in a lot of ways and do some of their own financial planning, and sometimes the industry doesn't really offer a good solution, right? And so a lot of people look online or they try to do things themselves and try to figure out their numbers. And, how does a dentist really know if they need to hire someone or if they should be doing things by themselves?
I've come across a fair amount of dentists who are investing on their own in particular, and they get into day trading. Dentists have high math IQs. I checked this out a while back, and by and large, dentists have an IQ in math which is higher than any profession other than math professors and physics professors. That's it.
Wow.
We're really high, and we think we can beat the system. And statistically, it doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm.
So guys really want to do it on their own. I wrote a series of articles in Dental Town. There were like 8 of them several years ago called Do It Yourself Investing, where I went through, if you really want to do it yourself, this is what's involved. The first part was about your home office, what you should buy, what kind of setup you should have. You should have budgeting through Mint or Quicken or whatever. And it gets into actual investing and how that is done. Later on, we go into estate planning, the basics. There's no way anybody should touch estate planning. That should be left to the attorneys. In any of these articles, though, I said, you may want to tackle this, but realistically, do you want to? And here's where you go for help.
Yeah.
I think it's stupid to try to do it all on your own. I know of guys that try to sell practices on their own, and they do it. But, man, you need attorneys and CPAs involved, or you can have real problems later on, several years later, and get sued.
Yeah.
I think it's probably wrong in most instances.
Yeah.
To do all of your finances on your own. Certain things you can take care of. Sure, you can track your budget. You can set up a basic plan, but you need an expert to help you out and see if that makes sense.
Yeah,
with your specifics.
Why do you think? Do you think it's difficult for an entrepreneur like a dentist to spend money on a service, whether it's legal or tax or consulting? Why do you think it's so hard for any business to want to spend money getting help? Have you seen that more in dentistry than you think should be there?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Where guys want to do it on their own.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's almost a lot of different things they want to do on their own.
A lot of guys, the dental equipment salesman will come in and service your equipment. A lot of guys try to do it on their own.
Yeah.
They'll take 3 hours out from the day to go fix a faucet.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy.
It's like, because I know how to do it and I don't want to bring somebody else in because I'm going to have to pay them $20 to do it. Is this nuts or not?
So I had someone the other day I was kind of talking to this about, and he said, I said, well, your hour, how much did you produce last year? How much did you collect? And he told me, and I said, well, how many hours did you work? And he said, I don't know, I probably took 4 weeks of vacation. And I said, well,
that's pretty good.
Based on what you did, your hourly rate is, somewhere around $350 an hour, or $400 an hour or something. And, which is pretty typical for, most guys. And so, he said, but my time's really not worth that. And I said, well, why is your time not worth that? He said, well, because a lot of times I'm not busy. And I'm like, well, why are you not busy? Why are you not busy all day? And if you were busy all day, do you know what your time would be worth? And he said, well, it doesn't really work that way because sometimes I'm just sitting at my desk, waiting for an appointment. So when I'm just sitting there, I just like to do things that I wouldn't have to, that I don't have to pay for. I said, well, if you spend a little more time trying to get to where your schedule was full and you were busy all day and you were at capacity, you'd be making $500 an hour, not $400 an hour. And this is a 50-year-old really sharp guy. And he just kind of said, well, yeah, I guess that makes sense. I said, the things that you're doing, they're like $40 an hour jobs.
Exactly.
You're doing $35 an hour work.
Exactly.
But you're not spending any time to try to get to do the $500 an hour work. And I just think that concept, even though I know people know about it. I know they know that they are worth. I know a dentist knows that they're worth a lot, but they will not pay an attorney because an attorney costs $150 an hour.
Exactly.
Or they'll try to sell their own practice because they don't want to pay 10%, and then they realize
guys
they're going to
hate that 10%. And it is worth it.
Anyway, I think that's an important concept. Let's talk one more about when people, if let's say they do decide to work with a financial advisor or they need to hire someone to do help. What are some of the attributes that that you think make a good financial advisor, and what are the kind of things people should look for? Different qualities or business models, just different ideas that you feel like, because you've seen a lot of advisors over the years, and you've probably seen a lot of different things that people do for dentists. So just wanted to get some of your perspective on that.
It's called fiduciary, the fiduciary standard. You want someone who's going to provide advice or products that are in your best interest for you in particular. There's been a great divide in the financial world since, 1940? Is that when the federal law was
passed? The Securities Act?
Yeah, the Securities Act.
33, 34?
Yeah. Traditional brokers and insurance agents have not been held to a fiduciary standard. They need to provide suitable products to you, which may or may not be the best products for you and may be more expensive than other equally good products.
Yeah.
That's been the issue.
So one thing is make sure you're working with somebody that is operating under the fiduciary standard.
Which would include a registered investment advisor, a certified financial planner. The traditional brokers don't do that. Now, we have a new standard that has just come up from the Labor Department, and I'm going to have you talk about that a little bit for us.
Yeah, well, I think without getting down into the weeds too much, there's some transparency that's going to start to have to happen inside of retirement plans at dental offices that wasn't happening before. A lot of times the fees and commissions and that were being paid through your retirement plan at work, those are kind of like buried into your 401k, and you couldn't really understand what they are. And now they're going to start requiring that those types of plans at least have a lot more transparency, and that you have access to a fiduciary that can provide investment advice on the plan separate from commissions. Basically, the thing that people need to know is that it's getting to be a topic that's more discussed. It's something that the investment communities, when you're a financial planner, you're going to have to start picking sides and say, am I going to be a fiduciary or am I not going to be? And it's going to be the public's going to be a little bit more aware now of the difference between a salesperson and an advisor who's being paid for their advice. So I don't know if that kind of covers the angle you wanted to take on it. But if you have anything else you want to add, I'd let you do that. Yeah,
to have somebody who's paid by the hour, flat fee, or a portion of assets that you have is definitely worthwhile. Anyone who says, I'm not charging you anything for this service, that there's something hidden.
Yeah, probably something to run away from.
And still, even with the new rules that are being enforced, they apply to retirement accounts, not cash accounts that you may have. Mm-hmm. Also, if you want to sue your advisor, you have to be involved in a class action. So they kind of watered down. I think the intent of the new rules was very, very positive for individual investors. It's not perfect, but it's better than it was before. Another thing about advisors, a lot of them will promise returns which are much, much higher than they should be. There's TV and radio host in particular who says that he feels that his certified advisors can provide a 12% return. Well, that's absolutely ridiculous. Anybody that promises over maybe even 8%, be very wary of. There's pie in the sky out there all over the place, and it isn't appropriate, and it's not professional.
I want to go to some kind of shotgun questions here that I think are interesting. Now, we haven't really rehearsed any of these answers, but I thought this would be a good segment and a way to get some get some like candid feedback from both of us. So,
from both of us, yes. Okay.
So let's go. I'm going to go down.
I'm channeling your best you.
The best you. I like it. Okay, so I'm going to ask Doug some questions, and then I'm going to respond to those with my first thoughts too, which I haven't. I had Ryan kind of help me. Sir Ryan Isaac helped me come up with some of these.
This could be trouble.
What we want to do is we want to give some financial advice to different types of dentists. Just what's on the top of our mind right now. Nothing like we're not going to overthink it, but we're going to start by looking at different people along different career paths, and we're going to give advice based on where they're at in their careers. Okay. Question number 1 is, Doug, what advice today do you give to a guy in dental school?
They're under so much pressure. And you weren't in dental school, but I was. So much pressure to get things done. to pass tests, to pass boards, to get your requirements done. There's a lot of worry from young dentists about how much they're going to have in student loans after they're out. And this is an issue. It's up to $500,000 in some cases today, or close to it. That's significant. But you know what? People do pay down their debt. They do survive. Back in the day, when I graduated in 1977, guys in private school, I was fortunate to go to UCLA, which was public, but in private school, in today's dollars, it was maybe a half to a third, which we have today, which was still really tough to get through. Not to say it wasn't, it was as significant as it is today, but people are paying it off. Some can pay off $500,000 in 6, 7, 8 years. There's generous federal grant payments plans. There's income-based plans. There's the repay loan, which replaced the pay loan. There's all sorts of different alternatives. In other words, don't let the financial issue get in the way. And I have young people who are thinking of applying to dental school who ask me if I think it's worth it.
Okay,
I say follow your heart.
Don't freak out about the student loans.
Absolutely not.
Because if you want to go into this, there's plenty of money to be made.
Agreed.
Anyway, let's talk about someone who's in 10 years in. Any financial advice for someone who's been 5 to 10 years in that comes to mind that just sticks out? You're like, you got 3 people you're going to meet with. They're all 5 to 10 years in, and what financial advice would you give that person at that point?
The big one from my standpoint is, if you are going to purchase a practice, if you are going to get yourself into another financial situation where there's a loan attached beyond student loans, wait on buying the luxury home until afterwards. There's so many dentists that right out of school go ahead and buy a home, and it may be a modest one, and that's certainly okay in some instances. But before you put big bucks into a home, know what your income is going to be.
Yeah, that's great advice.
One of the worst case scenarios is you buy a home, then a year later buy the practice. Hey, guess who did that? Me. It puts enormous pressure on you, purchasing a practice or starting out in a practice, having that home loan.
That's such a good piece of advice.
Wait a couple years until you're stable and you know what you can actually afford. It may be more than the home you just bought.
Yeah,
it could be,
you don't know,
could
though.
be more.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'd like to say, and this seems to be off the wall here, but it isn't, is join a study club. Engage the local dentists in your community. I don't care if it's Indian Health. You're going to have contacts with other dentists in your area. This is the smartest decision I ever made. I was involved in 2 or 3 study clubs always during my dental career. Those other dentists helped me tremendously, clinically and financially.
That's really good insight. Would you say maybe renting up to that point could make sense, or at least,
You run the figures. I argue with people about this all the time. A dentist that's rented his whole life, never bought a home,
still ahead.
Like at age 55, is always in great shape financially. Absolutely always. And the other thing is they're always single. So do you really make money on your primary residence over a period of time? I certainly haven't.
Yeah.
I'm in the whole long term.
Yeah.
But you know what? Homes provide stability. And stability gives you the ability to earn more income.
I think that's the reason you buy a home. And that's the good point, though.
Yeah.
Why you need to make that long-term decision later on. I can't tell you how many people the housing tail wags the practice dog.
Oh, my God. Absolutely.
It's like they don't make smart decisions within the practice because the housing decision's kind of driving it.
Isn't it amazing?
It's funny, like, why are we beating this housing thing over the head so much? But it's because it's such a huge issue, man.
It's Stanley and Danko from way, way back said that's the biggest obstacle we all have. And it's not professionals, it's everybody in America.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about someone who's maybe at that. I didn't really get to give a tip. I just agreed with your tip on the 5 to 10 year tip. I agree with that tip, and I'm going to give one on the 5 to 10 year guy.
Okay.
The 5 to 10 year guy, I would say to this person, you need to have a solid advisory board. Your board of directors, your advisory board, it needs to be in place. Every business owner around the world builds a board of directors, and I've built one for myself. It's been invaluable to me. I know that all startups do it. That's the success of Silicon Valley, is largely based on how they're able to put boards of directors in place to help little companies get off the ground and be successful. And dentists just aren't quite as resourceful that way. And I'd say 10 years in, make sure that you're really happy with your advisory board, because you should have them from day one. But by the time you get 5 to 10 years in, you'll have rotated through some people. You'll have found who the right fits are for those different roles that we talked about in that last episode. And I just feel like that's what comes to mind to me at that point. I just feel like you should be really in a stable position with a good advisory team that's going to help you grow a little bit more. Because if you can make an extra $50,000, an extra $75,000 for the next 10 years, I mean, it will make a world of difference. And you don't have to spend a lot to make that happen. You just have to have the right systems in place. So that's my thought for the 10-year guy. Anything to add to that?
You get major points on this one,
okay.
Dude. Here's the reason. I have never come across an advisor before who has laid it out as completely as you two guys did a couple days ago. So this is episode 26 or 27. The 9 people that you need on your board, I think is what it was called.
Yeah.
Something to that effect. I just don't see anybody who lays it out like that. You need these people on board to help you out.
Yeah.
It gets you better organized. You feel better about yourself. And there's so many groups out there and entrepreneurs who come to your practice and say, I'll do it all.
Yeah,
I'll take care of your investments, estate planning. I can do that. Practice management. I can do that. I can hire and fire your people. I can take care of all of that. And it just doesn't work. You need a board. What's the bottom line here? You're going to practice better dentistry.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to make any sense, but you're going to practice better dentistry because you're going to feel more comfortable working in your office, guys.
Yeah.
Excellent point.
Okay, let's talk about a dentist that's 15 or 20 years in who feels like they're not struggling, that they feel like they're doing well. You talk to somebody, and that's the tone he gives you. He says, I'm doing really well, and I'm 20 years in. What financial advice starts coming to mind for that type of person at that point? Anything?
It's time to buy a plane. Because if you weren't struggling now, you will be. Yeah. That's all I came up with on that one, Reese.
That's a good point, though. I think that's true.
Get stupid.
Like that. Maybe that's why I think there's two people.
Planes are cool, but they're really expensive. 20
years in, there's two kinds of people. One person says, I really need help. And one person says, I don't really need help. I'm doing great.
Yeah. Okay.
And maybe they're legitimately in a good spot. Maybe the guy that says he doesn't need any help is legitimately in a good spot. But I think the point you're making is, are you sure? Have you really validated whether you're going to be okay? Or do you just feel good because you have a lot of stuff? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
You just have a lot of things, and you can buy whatever you want, and do you just make a lot of money, or are you worth a lot of money?
Exactly.
There's a big difference there, right?
Yeah, and you know what? Guys into their 60s who are in a position where they have a lot of things and they don't have a lot of savings, they're not ready to retire, think that they can work through it.
Yeah.
They can work long enough to eventually make it work, and they're working in their 70s. And we know of guys that are working in their 70s.
Yeah. I think it just knowing there's a big difference between what you're worth and what you make. And sometimes that guy that's 15 or 20 years in, when they say, I'm doing great, I would just make sure that you're able to know that you're doing great based on your net worth. And I'd say if your net worth, if you add up all your stuff and subtract your debt, if it's more than 30 times what you spend in a year, you're doing great.
Exactly.
If you're 10 times what you spend in a year, you're probably not close. You're really not there.
Right.
If you're 20 times, you're getting close, right?
Yeah.
If you're 40 or more of what you spend in a year, if you're worth 40 times what you spend in a year,
that's really good.
Yeah, you're great, and you're ready to. You're wrapped up. You don't need to work anymore. You can choose to, but you don't have to.
And that gives you total flexibility in your life. Yeah. It's amazing to have flexibility.
Yeah, it is. Okay, what about the person that's really struggling still late? The person that says, Doug, I feel like I'm in a bind still, and I'm 55 years old. I'm 60 years old. what's your advice to them, you know?
That's a good question. You know, I did have an answer to that, and I'm going to give it to you, and I'm going to defer to you on the rest of it. I see people who are 15 years into their practice, sometimes 20 years, who finally have paid off their practice loan. Now, it may be at the 10-year mark, but anyway, they've paid off a big loan. And what do? They decide to buy a bigger house or to significantly upgrade their house. In other words, they see this $5,000 or $6,000 a month that's just sitting there. It's not there. Now what do I do? This is a time when they can really ramp up their savings.
That's great advice.
Build their investments, but instead they go buy something else, which maybe they think they rationalize in their mind, well, the house is going to be worth more later, so it's a good investment. Not as much as buying, a diversified portfolio of mutual funds or ETFs, whatever. So this is my thought on that, but I think you have a different take.
20 plus, I'd be someone who's saying that they're struggling. I'd say you need to take a real hard look at that point. If you still feel like you're struggling, you need to take a really hard look at your lifestyle expenses and start to get used to pretty quickly a more realistic a living expense budget for yourself. Because if you're struggling and you're 55 or 60 and you're not getting ahead, it's because you've gotten used to living on way more than you make. And that's going to be really hard to change at any point. I mean, ever. And the only time you'll get some relief is when Social Security kicks in at 67, which coincidentally is like the average dentist retirement age, or at 70.
I've actually heard 69 from Charles Blair.
Yeah.
It's even higher. Yeah.
And sometimes because sometimes that's when Social Security kicks in. I mean, honestly, when I see Charles Blair's stats or I see the ADA stats, those are like the most common times when they can take their Social Security checks. And so it's just it's like that's when it happens. And it shouldn't be that way, but I think you need to if you're struggling, it probably is because you're not living by the numbers. Your savings rate's too low, your living expenses are too high, and you might as well get used to making some hard decisions right now. And those hard decisions usually involve, and I don't want to say it because everyone's going to freak out, but it usually involves relooking at your housing. And it usually involves relooking at a lot of your lifestyle expenses, and saying, can I really afford to live the way I'm living? Because if you're struggling and you feel like you haven't made a lot of progress and you're in your early 60s, it's probably lifestyle, it's probably housing, and you've got to make some hard decisions quick, or you're going to be out into your late 70s still working as an associate, because I see it,
And while you're talking, I was trying to think of other lifestyle choices that you would have to cut back on rather than housing. There really isn't anything significant at that point.
Yeah, it usually
it's not really... vacations, not so much. Clothes, not so much. Cars, guys kind of get over that. Well, some of us get over it in our 50s and 60s.
Yeah. Build your net worth up to a point to where you're at that 30, 35 multiple of spending, and you can stay in your house and you don't need to worry about it. But if you're at a 10 or a 12 or a 14 of multiple of spending, it's just going to be too much of a challenge for you to ever get to the point where you can be financially secure. And I just hate having Social Security, that fixed income stream, be your only saving grace. It's just, it makes
that's the American way, pretty much.
Yeah,
though.
It's just a mess. But yeah. Anyway, Doug, it's been a pleasure. I think we've got a ton of content down for people. You've been a wealth of information. You've got great perspective. So any parting thoughts you'd like to leave with people before we go? Yeah,
I would like to say here that I think what you guys have done with your elements in particular, we went through some analyzation of specific individuals beforehand and how you guys are tracking expenses, saving, investments, simplifying it down to something that people can actually understand easily in their practices as far as personal and professional ways of doing things, I think has been simplified to a point where it really works out well. In other words, it's elegant.
Oh, thanks.
I think your services here are very elegant, well thought out. You're not selling pie in the sky to people. You actually want to help people and work with them, and I applaud that.
Well, thanks, Doug. I really appreciate it. You've done a lot for the industry, and we look forward to seeing what the next 30 or 40 years of your career bring.
More mountain biking accidents, probably.
Yeah, you got to take care of that hand. All right, you heard it here on the Dentist Money Show, Industry Expert Series with Doug Carlsen. Thanks again, Doug. Look forward to having you back soon.
Hey, would be my pleasure. Thanks.